The text message appeared just as I was about to toast my son's engagement. Don't react, they're recording you. Check under the centerpiece. I kept smiling, but what I discovered in the next 48 hours destroyed my family forever. I'm grateful you're here. Stay with my story until the end and comment which country you're watching from so I can see how far this reaches. At 70 years old, I thought I'd seen everything life could throw at me. I'd survived my husband Roland's sudden death from a heart attack 5 years ago, raised 3 children mostly on my own during his final years when illness had kept him bedridden, and built Whitfield Events from a small home-based catering service into one of the most respected event planning companies in Riverside County. My hands had prepared food for thousands of weddings, anniversaries, and celebrations. Those same hands had wiped away countless tears, signed mortgage papers alone, and held my children through every crisis life threw at them. But nothing, absolutely nothing, had prepared me for what was about to unfold that Saturday evening in October. The invitation had come 3 days earlier. My son Damien had called me Tuesday afternoon, his voice carrying that particular brightness that always meant he wanted something. At 43, Damien had never quite outgrown that tendency to turn on the charm when he needed his mother's approval or assistance. "Mom, Catalina and I would love to have you over for dinner this Saturday," he'd said. "Just the 3 of us. Intimate, special. We have something important we want to discuss with you." My heart had leapt at his words. Perhaps they were finally setting a wedding date. Damien had introduced us to Catalina Delgado 8 months ago at a 4th of July barbecue, and within 6 weeks, they'd announced their engagement. It had felt rushed to me. Damien had only been divorced from his first wife, Jennifer, for 14 months, but I'd kept my concerns to myself. My son was a grown man. He deserved happiness after the painful disillusion of his 12-year marriage. "That sounds wonderful, sweetheart," I'd replied, already mentally planning what I might wear, what wine I should bring. "Should I bring anything?" "Just yourself, Mom. Catalina's taking care of everything. She's really excited to spend time with you." That should have been my first clue. In the 8 months I'd known Catalina, excited to spend time with me was never an accurate description of her feelings toward me. Polite? Yes. Cordial? When necessary. But excited? Never. Saturday arrived with that particular crispness that October brings to Southern California. The sky impossibly blue, the air carrying just enough coolness to remind you that seasons do change, even in places where palm trees grow. I dressed carefully in a navy dress that Roland had always said brought out my eyes, paired with the pearl earrings my mother had given me on my 50th birthday. At 70, I'd learned that looking put together was a form of armor in situations where you might need to defend yourself. Damien lived in a modern townhouse in the Belmont Heights neighborhood of Riverside. All clean lines, floor-to-ceiling windows, and minimalist furniture that always made me nervous about leaving fingerprints on anything. It was a far cry from the comfortable, cluttered family home where I'd raised him and his sisters. But he seemed to love it. Or perhaps Catalina loved it. I was never quite sure where Damien's preferences ended and hers began. I arrived at exactly 6:30 p.m., punctual as always. Damien opened the door with a huge smile, pulling me into a tight hug that lasted just a beat longer than normal. Another warning sign I didn't recognize at the time. "Mom, you look beautiful," he said, ushering me inside. He was wearing a button-down shirt I didn't recognize, expensive-looking, probably picked out by Catalina, and his hair was styled with more product than usual. Come in. Catalina's just finishing up in the kitchen." The townhouse smelled amazing. Garlic, rosemary, something rich and savory that made my stomach growl despite my nervousness. Whatever else Catalina might be, she knew her way around a kitchen. That was something we actually had in common, though we'd never bonded over it the way I'd secretly hoped we might. The dining room table had been set with obvious care. White linens, crystal wine glasses that caught the light from the modern chandelier overhead, and a centerpiece that immediately drew my attention, an elaborate arrangement of ivory roses, white peonies, and silvery eucalyptus branches, all artfully arranged in a low rectangular glass vase. "Catalina did the flowers herself," Damien said, noticing my gaze. "She took a floral arrangement class last month. She's incredibly talented." "It's beautiful," I said honestly. It was beautiful. Professional quality. The kind of centerpiece I would have charged $300 to create for a client's event. Mrs. Whitfield, so wonderful to see you. Catalina emerged from the kitchen, and I felt the familiar, complicated swirl of emotions I always experienced around my future daughter-in-law. Catalina Delgado was 31 years old, although she could have passed for 25. She had the kind of beauty that didn't just happen, it was carefully cultivated and maintained. Her dark hair fell in precisely styled waves over her shoulders. Her makeup was flawless in that way that looks natural but probably took 45 minutes to achieve. And her dress, a sleek burgundy number that probably cost more than my monthly grocery bill, fit her like it had been custom-made, which, knowing Catalina, probably had been.
She'd grown up in Los Angeles, the daughter of a successful entertainment attorney and a former model. She worked in luxury brand consulting, whatever that meant, and seemed to view the world through a lens of status, appearances, and strategic positioning. She collected designer handbags the way some people collected stamps. She name-dropped casually and often. And she had a particular talent for making observations that sounded like compliments, but felt like criticisms. "I hope you're hungry," Catalina said, air-kissing near both my cheeks, a gesture that always felt performative rather than genuine. I prepared beef Wellington, roasted asparagus with hollandaise, and a chocolate soufflé for dessert. "That sounds incredible," I said, meaning it. "You've gone to so much trouble." "Well, this is a special evening," she replied, exchanging a quick glance with Damien that I couldn't quite interpret. "We wanted everything to be perfect." We settled at the table, Damien pouring wine, a Napa Valley Cabernet that he announced cost $150 a bottle, while Catalina brought out the first course, a delicate salad with candied walnuts and goat cheese. "So, Mom, tell us about the business," Damien began, and I launched into updates about Whitfield Events. We had 3 weddings booked for November, a major corporate holiday party in December, and I just hired 2 new part-time staff members to help with the increasing demand. "That sounds exhausting," Catalina said, delicately spearing a piece of lettuce. "Running a business at your age, don't you ever want to just relax? Enjoy your retirement?" "I'm not retired," I said, keeping my voice light. "I love what I do. Why would I stop?" "Well, there's more to life than work. Travel, hobbies, spending time with family. You've worked hard your whole life. Don't you deserve to rest?" There was something in her tone, a particular emphasis on certain words, that made them feel less like concern and more like criticism, as if my choice to continue working was somehow a character flaw rather than a source of pride and purpose. "I do travel," I said mildly. "I went to Seattle last spring to visit my daughter Michaela, and I spend plenty of time with family." "But you live alone in that big house. 4 bedrooms, that huge yard, all those stairs. That's a lot of maintenance for one person." "I manage just fine," I replied, feeling the first prickle of defensiveness. Damien cleared his throat. "Actually, Mom, that's partly what we wanted to talk to you about tonight." My pulse quickened. Here it comes, I thought. Maybe they wanted me to consider selling the house and moving closer to them, or perhaps they wanted to renovate part of my home so I could live there more independently as I aged. Both my daughters, Michaela and Zara, had mentioned similar concerns, loving concerns about my living situation as I got older. "Your mother and I have been doing a lot of talking," Damien began, reaching across the table to take Catalina's hand. The gesture looked rehearsed. "About our future together, about family, about responsibilities. And about you, Mrs. Whitfield," Catalina added, her expression carefully arranged into what I assumed was supposed to be caring concern. "We worry about you." "Worry? Sweetheart, there's nothing to worry about. I'm healthy, I'm active, my business is thriving." "But for how much longer?" Catalina interrupted, her voice taking on a sharper edge. "Forgive me for being blunt, Mrs. Whitfield, but you're 70 years old. Statistics show that people your age face increasing health risks, falls, memory issues, heart problems. What happens if you have an emergency and no one is there to help you?" I opened my mouth to respond, but Damien jumped in. "She's right, Mom. We've been researching this. Did you know that 36% of people over 65 who live alone experience a serious fall each year, and that 20% of those falls result in significant injury?" The specificity of the statistics felt strange, as if they'd been preparing for this conversation, rehearsing. "I appreciate your concern," I said carefully, "but I'm hardly helpless. I have friends, neighbors, my church community." "Community isn't the same as family," Catalina said firmly, "and it's not the same as professional care, which is why Damien and I have been exploring options. Options. The word hung in the air like a threat. "What kind of options?" I asked, though part of me didn't want to know the answer. Damien leaned forward, his expression earnest. "There's a wonderful senior living community about 30 minutes from here. It's called Serenity Gardens. We went and toured it last week, and Mom, it's incredible. They have one-bedroom apartments, gourmet dining, activities, medical staff on site 24/7. You'd be safe, you'd be cared for, and you'd be close enough that we could visit all the time." The room seemed to tilt slightly. Senior living community. They wanted me to move into a retirement home? "Damien, I don't need—" "We know it's a big change," Catalina interrupted smoothly. "But think about the benefits. No more worrying about home maintenance, no more mowing that huge lawn, no more climbing stairs. Everything would be taken care of for you. You could finally relax and enjoy your golden years." Golden years. The phrase sounded like a marketing slogan. "And the house," Damien continued, not meeting my eyes now, "Catalina and I have been thinking. Bay Ridge property values have increased by 40% in the last 3 years. Your house is probably worth close to $800,000 now, maybe more." There it was, the real reason for this dinner, this conversation, this carefully orchestrated intervention. "That's a lot of equity just sitting there," Catalina added. "Equity that could be used to secure your future, pay for your care at Serenity Gardens, set up trust funds for future grandchildren." She placed a hand on her stomach briefly, a gesture so theatrical I almost laughed. Were they already pregnant, or was this just another manipulation tactic? "You want me to sell my home," I said flatly. "The home where I raised my children, where Roland died, where every room holds 40 years of memories." "We want you to be practical, Mom," Damien said, a hint of impatience creeping into his voice. "Those are just memories. You can take them with you wherever you go. But this is about your safety, your future. What if something happens to you in that house? What if you fall down the stairs and no one finds you for days?" "Don't be so dramatic, Damien. I'm perfectly—" That's when my phone buzzed in my lap. The sound was barely audible under the conversation, but I felt the vibration against my leg. I glanced down discreetly, expecting maybe a text from one of my daughters or a notification from the business. Unknown number. The message made my blood turn to ice. "Don't react. They're recording you. Check under the centerpiece. There's a hidden camera. They've been documenting everything you say and do tonight. You're being set up. Someone who cares." My heart began to hammer against my ribs so hard I was sure they could hear it. I looked up slowly, very slowly, trying to keep my expression neutral even as panic flooded my system. Damien was watching me intently. "Mom, you okay? You look pale." "I'm fine," I managed, forcing what I hoped was a normal smile. "This wine is stronger than I'm used to." I set my phone face down on my lap with trembling fingers, my mind racing. A camera hidden in the centerpiece, recording everything. I looked at the flower arrangement sitting between us, those beautiful ivory roses and white peonies, the artful eucalyptus branches. The vase was rectangular, low, made of thick glass. Perfect for hiding something small. A tiny camera lens would be nearly impossible to spot among all those stems and blooms. "Are you sure you're all right, Mrs. Whitfield?" Catalina's voice dripped with false concern. "Should we get you some water?" No, I'm fine," I said, taking a slow sip of wine to buy myself time to think. "Please, continue. You were talking about Serenity Gardens." Why would they be recording this conversation? What possible reason could they have for documenting my reactions to their proposal? The answer hit me like a punch to the gut. Legal evidence.
They were building a case. If they wanted me declared incompetent, if they wanted to take control of my assets, they would need proof that I wasn't capable of managing my own affairs. What better evidence than video footage of me at a family dinner potentially showing confusion, poor judgment, or inability to make sound decisions? But I'd been completely coherent. I'd been articulate and clear. So what were they hoping to capture? "Mom, you're spacing out," Damien said. And there was something in his voice, a note of satisfaction. See, this is exactly what we're worried about. These little moments where you seem to just drift away. Drift away? I paused for maybe 10 seconds to process shocking information. I'm not drifting anywhere, Damien. I'm listening to you propose that I sell my home and move into a facility for seniors. It's not a facility, Catalina corrected. It's a community. A beautiful, safe community where you'd be surrounded by people your own age, where you'd have access to care. "I don't need care," I said more sharply than I intended. Then I caught myself. The camera. They wanted me to seem unstable, emotional, irrational. I forced myself to soften my tone. "What I mean is, I'm grateful for your concern, but I'm quite capable of living independently." "For now, but what about 6 months from now, a year? These things progress quickly at your age, Mrs. Whitfield. Memory issues, mobility problems, health complications. Wouldn't you rather plan ahead now while you still have the capacity to make good decisions?" "Well, you still have the capacity." The phrase was carefully chosen, deliberately insulting, designed to provoke a reaction. I smiled sweetly instead. "I have excellent capacity, dear. I run a successful catering business that requires complex planning, budget management, and client relations. I manage all my own finances. I remember every appointment, every obligation, every birthday. My doctor says I'm in remarkable health for my age." "Doctors don't see everything," Damien said quietly. "We're with you more than your doctor is. We see the little changes, the way you repeat yourself sometimes, the way you forget small details." "I don't repeat myself," I interrupted, then realized that sounded defensive, combative, exactly what they wanted on camera. I took a breath. "I'm very careful about my mental acuity, Damien. I do crossword puzzles every morning. I read voraciously. I engage with complex business problems daily. My mind is sharp." "Of course it is," Catalina soothed, but her eyes were calculating. "No one's saying you're incompetent, Mrs. Whitfield. We're just saying that prevention is better than cure. Why wait for a crisis when you could plan ahead now while you still have the capacity to make good decisions?"
I have staff now, I pointed out. I'm not doing everything myself anymore. "But you're still working 60-hour weeks during busy seasons," Catalina said. "Damien tells me you were up until midnight last Saturday finishing a wedding cake because your baker called in sick. That's not sustainable, Mrs. Whitfield. That's dangerous. What if you'd had a heart attack? What if you'd collapsed from exhaustion?" How did she know about the wedding cake? I'd mentioned it to Damien in passing during a phone call. Had he been taking notes? Building a file of evidence of my supposedly declining capabilities? "Many people work long hours," I said evenly. "That's what business ownership requires. At 40, sure. At 50, maybe. But at 70? Catalina shook her head. "There's a reason most people retire by 65, Mrs. Whitfield. The body can't keep up with those demands. My body is doing just fine." "Is it?" Damien leaned forward. "Mom, be honest. How's your back? You've been complaining about pain for months, and your knees. I've noticed you wince when you stand up. These are signs that your body is telling you to slow down." I did have back pain. I did have some knee issues. I was 70 years old. Some aches and pains were normal, but the way Damien was presenting it made it sound like I was falling apart. Everyone has some physical discomfort as they age.
That doesn't mean I need to give up everything that gives my life meaning. But what if we could take that burden off your shoulders? Catalina said, her voice suddenly warm and conspiratorial. Damien and I have been discussing the business. We think there might be a buyer. My stomach dropped. A buyer? A company called Premier Events. They're a large catering conglomerate based in Los Angeles. They've been expanding throughout Southern California, acquiring smaller boutique companies. They're interested in Whitfield Events, your client list, your reputation, your brand. You've been talking to them about my business without consulting me? We just made some preliminary inquiries, Damien said defensively. We wanted to know what the business might be worth before bringing it to you. Turns out it's quite valuable, Mom. They're willing to pay $450,000 for a full acquisition. $450,000 for the business I'd built from nothing, for 30 years of relationships, recipes, reputation. And combined with the proceeds from selling the house, Catalina added, that would give you well over $1 million. That's more than enough to pay for Serenity Gardens for the rest of your life, with plenty left over for any medical needs, entertainment, travel. You'd be financially secure. I'm already financially secure, I said, my voice harder now, despite my efforts to stay calm. I own my home outright. My business is profitable. I have retirement savings and Roland's life insurance. I don't need to liquidate everything I've worked for. But wouldn't it be nice to not have to work anymore, Damien pressed? To wake up every day with no responsibilities, no stress, no pressure, to just rest? Rest. The way he said it made it sound like death. I glanced at the centerpiece again, imagining that hidden camera capturing my face, my reactions, every micro-expression that might later be analyzed to prove I was confused, incompetent, in need of guardianship. My phone buzzed a third time. I pretended to adjust my napkin, sneaking a glance at the screen. They've been planning this for months. Your son is in debt, serious debt. He needs your money. The recording is to establish incompetence for guardianship proceedings. Don't sign anything. Don't agree to anything. I'll explain everything tomorrow. Debt. Damien was in debt. This wasn't about my well-being at all. This was about money. Everything clicked into place with horrible clarity. The rushed engagement to a woman clearly motivated by status and wealth, the expensive townhouse I knew a high school guidance counselor's salary couldn't really afford, the designer clothes, the $150 bottles of wine, the luxury SUV I'd seen parked in his driveway. Damien had always been the child who struggled with money management. Even as a teenager, he'd blown through his allowance within days, then tried to charm me into giving him more. In college, he'd racked up credit card debt that Roland and I had quietly paid off. His divorce from Jennifer was expensive. She got the house, half his retirement, spousal support. And now he'd found Catalina with her expensive tastes and lifestyle expectations, and he was drowning. Mom? Damien's voice pulled me back. You've been quiet for a while. What do you think about what we've proposed? I looked at my son, this man I'd carried in my body, nursed through childhood illnesses, supported through failed classes and broken hearts and professional setbacks. This man who was now trying to take everything I'd built. I think, I said slowly, choosing every word carefully, that this is a very big decision, too big to make tonight. Catalina's expression tightened almost imperceptibly. Of course, we understand it's a lot to process. But we do hope you'll think about it seriously, Mom. We're not trying to pressure you. We just want what's best for you. Liar, I thought. But I smiled. I know, sweetheart, and I appreciate your concern, both of you. The rest of the dinner passed in a blur. They served the beef Wellington, which was perfect, but tasted like sawdust in my mouth. They asked me questions, seemingly innocuous, but I now recognize them as potential traps. Questions about whether I remembered paying certain bills, whether I'd gotten confused about appointments recently, whether I ever felt overwhelmed by daily tasks. I answered carefully, aware of that camera watching my every move, recording my every word.
This has been lovely, I said, finally checking my watch, but I should get going.
It's getting late, and I have an early morning tomorrow. On a Sunday? Catalina's eyebrows rose. What could you possibly have to do on a Sunday morning? Church, I said simply. Another test. Would a competent person remember their regular Sunday routine? Of course, Damien said, standing. Let me walk you out, Mom. At the door, he hugged me again, and I felt him trembling slightly. Guilt? Fear? Anticipation of the money he thought was coming? I love you, Mom. I hope you know that everything we said tonight comes from a place of love. I pulled back and looked at my son's face. He'd inherited Roland's blue eyes, my mother's strong chin. I'd held him minutes after he was born, this perfect tiny creature who I'd loved more than I thought it possible to love anything. I love you too, Damien, I said. And despite everything, despite the betrayal and the scheming and the camera hidden in flowers, I meant it. But as I drove home through the dark streets of Riverside, my hands gripping the steering wheel so tightly my knuckles went white, I understood something fundamental had broken between us. My phone buzzed again as I pulled into my driveway. 10 a.m. tomorrow, the Daily Grind coffee shop on Maple Street. Come alone, park in the back lot, don't tell anyone, especially not your son. What I have to show you will change everything. I sat in my car for a long time, staring at my house, this home I'd lived in for 40 years, where I'd raised my children, where I'd nursed Roland through his final illness, where every corner held memories both beautiful and painful. They wanted to take it from me. They wanted to strip away my independence, my business, my autonomy, all under the guise of caring for my well-being. But I wasn't some helpless old woman who could be manipulated and controlled. I was Margaret Eleanor Whitfield, and I'd survived far worse than a scheming son and his gold-digger fiancé. Tomorrow, I would learn who was warning me, and why. Tomorrow, I would find out exactly how deep this betrayal went. But tonight, I allowed myself to sit in my driveway and cry. For the son I thought I knew. For the family I thought I had. And for the innocence I could never get back. The game was on. But Damien and Catalina had made one critical mistake. They underestimated their target. And that was going to cost them everything. I didn't sleep that night. How could I? Every time I closed my eyes, I saw Damien's face across that dinner table, heard Catalina's patronizing voice talking about my golden years, felt the weight of that hidden camera watching my every reaction like I was some laboratory specimen to be studied and documented. At 3 a.m., I gave up on sleep entirely and made myself tea in the kitchen where I'd prepared thousands of meals over 4 decades. The house was silent, except for the settling of old wood and the hum of the refrigerator. Sounds so familiar that they'd become a kind of white noise in my life. But tonight, every creak felt ominous. Every shadow seemed to hide some new threat. I sat at my kitchen table with my laptop and began researching. Guardianship proceedings, legal incompetence, elder financial abuse. The phrases made my stomach turn, but I forced myself to read article after article, legal brief after legal brief. What I learned terrified me. If someone wanted to take control of another person's assets, they could petition the court for guardianship on the grounds of mental or physical incapacity. The bar was surprisingly low. They just needed to demonstrate that the person couldn't manage their own affairs. And what constituted evidence? Medical records showing confusion or memory loss, testimony from family members about declining capabilities, documentation of poor judgment or inability to handle daily tasks, or video footage of a 70-year-old woman at a family dinner, perhaps appearing confused, forgetful, or unable to make sound decisions. The camera hadn't been meant to catch me at my worst. It had been meant to create a narrative. They could edit that footage however they wanted, take moments out of context, splice together reactions, build a case that I was a danger to myself and needed someone else to manage my life. And once they had guardianship, they'd have control of everything. My house, my business, my bank accounts. They could sell it all, claim it was for my care. And I'd have almost no legal recourse to stop them. I thought about Damien as a little boy, maybe 7 years old, coming to me in tears because he'd accidentally broken his sister Michaela's favorite doll. "I didn't mean to, Mama. I was just playing. I didn't think it would break." That's what I wanted to believe now, that he didn't mean to hurt me, that he was just in over his head financially and wasn't thinking clearly. But the more I learned about what they were planning, the harder it became to maintain that charitable interpretation. This wasn't an accident. This was calculated, methodical, cruel. By the time dawn broke over Riverside, painting my kitchen in shades of pink and gold, I'd made myself sick with research and worry. But I'd made myself something else. Prepared. I showered and dressed carefully, not the comfortable jeans and sweater I'd normally wear on a Sunday, but navy pants and a crisp white blouse. Armor, again. If I was walking into an ambush, I'd do it looking competent and composed. The daily grind was a local coffee shop on Maple Street, tucked between a used bookstore and a yoga studio. I'd been there a few times over the years. Decent coffee, quiet atmosphere, popular with the Sunday morning crowd of students and freelancers camped out with their laptops.
I arrived at 9:45 a.m., 15 minutes early. The text had said to park in the back lot, so I did, pulling my silver Honda Accord into a spot near the rear entrance. My hands were shaking as I turned off the engine. Who was I about to meet? How did they know about the camera, about Damien's plans? And most importantly, could I trust them? At exactly 10 p.m., a woman appeared at my passenger window and tapped gently on the glass. I jumped, my heart racing, then took a breath and hit the unlock button. She slid into the passenger seat quickly, glancing around the parking lot as if checking for observers. She was younger than me, maybe late 50s, early 60s, with short silver hair, sharp, intelligent eyes behind designer glasses, and an air of competence that immediately put me at ease, despite the bizarre circumstances. "Mrs. Whitfield," she said, extending her hand. "My name is Patricia Vance. I'm a private investigator, and I've been following your son and his fiancée for the past 3 weeks." I shook her hand automatically, my mind reeling. "Following them? Why? Who hired you?" "I'll get to that," Patricia said. "But first, I need to show you something. May I?" She gestured to her phone. I nodded, and she pulled up a video. My stomach clenched as I recognized Damien's townhouse, the footage clearly taken from outside through a window. The camera was focused on the dining room, on that same table where I had sat just 12 hours ago. But this footage was from earlier, maybe a week ago, based on the different flowers in the centerpiece vase. "Watch," Patricia said quietly. On the screen, Damien and Catalina were sitting at the table with another man I didn't recognize. Middle-aged, expensive suit, leather briefcase open in front of him. "This is what we discussed, Mr. Morrison," the stranger was saying, his voice muffled but audible. "Once you have guardianship, you'll have full legal authority over your mother's assets. The house can be sold immediately. Current market value should net you around $850,000 after expenses. The business is trickier, but I've identified 3 potential buyers who'd pay anywhere from $400,000 to $500,000 for a full acquisition." My breath caught in my throat. I was watching my son casually discuss selling my entire life as if I were already dead. "And she won't be able to fight it?" Catalina asked, "even if she's mentally competent?" "The beauty of guardianship proceedings," the man said, and I could hear the sleazy satisfaction in his voice, "is that once the court grants them, the burden of proof shifts. She'd have to prove she's competent, which is nearly impossible when someone already has guardianship. Most people don't even try. They just accept it." "What about her other children?" Damien asked. "My sisters, won't they object?" "Do they live locally?"
No, Michaela's in Seattle, Zara's in Phoenix. Then they're not likely to interfere, especially if you present it as being in your mother's best interest. People don't want to be the bad guy who denies their elderly parent proper care. And by the time they realize what's really happening, it'll be too late. The assets will be liquidated, the money will be moved, and there's nothing they can do about it. On the video, Damien nodded slowly. Then he asked the question that shattered what was left of my heart. And the timeline. How fast can we make this happen? If we play this right, we can have guardianship within 60 days, maybe sooner if we can document enough evidence of incapacity. That's where the recordings come in. Every interaction you have with her now needs to be documented. We're building a narrative of decline, memory lapses, poor judgment, inability to manage complex affairs. The court needs to see a pattern. She's not actually declining, though, Catalina pointed out. Margaret's as sharp as a tack. Anyone who meets her can see that. The man smiled. I could hear it in his voice, even though the video quality wasn't perfect. That's where strategic editing and selective presentation come in. We don't need her to actually be incompetent. We just need to convince a judge that she might be. Medical testimony helps. We'll need to get her evaluated by a doctor who's sympathetic to our position. Social workers' reports about safety concerns. And most importantly, family testimony about how worried you are. Jesus, I whispered, staring at the screen. Patricia paused the video. This one was taken 4 days ago. Same location. This time, Catalina was alone with someone else, a woman I didn't recognize. Blonde, early 40s, wearing medical scrubs. Dr. Brennan, thank you so much for meeting with me. I'm just so worried about my future mother-in-law. Margaret has been showing some really concerning signs lately. What kind of signs? The doctor asked. Memory lapses mostly. She repeats herself constantly. Last week she forgot she'd already told me a story and told it again, word for word. And she's been making some questionable financial decisions. Nearly got scammed by one of those phone scams targeting seniors. Thank God Damien caught it. Every word was a lie. I'd never repeated a story to Catalina. We barely talked. I'd never almost fallen for a phone scam. This was pure fabrication.
And physically, Dr. Brennan asked. She's struggling. She tries to hide it, but I've noticed she's unsteady on stairs, has trouble with fine motor tasks like buttoning clothes or signing her name clearly, and she's lost weight. I don't think she's eating properly. She lives alone in this huge house, and I think she's just not capable of caring for herself anymore. More lies. I was perfectly steady. My handwriting was as clear as it had been. I'd actually gained 5 pounds recently from sampling too many of my own catering creations. It sounds like she might benefit from a comprehensive evaluation, Dr. Brennan said. If you can get her to come in for an appointment, I can run some cognitive assessments, check her physical capabilities. That would be wonderful, Catalina gushed. And if your evaluation shows what we suspect, that she needs more supervision and support, would you be willing to testify to that in court if necessary? There was a pause. Then, if my professional assessment indicates that Ms. Whitfield requires guardianship for her own safety and well-being, then yes, I'd provide that testimony. Patricia stopped the video. Dr. Sarah Brennan. She's not actually a physician, she's a nurse practitioner, and she has a history of providing questionable medical testimony in guardianship cases. There's a whole network of these people, lawyers, medical professionals, even social workers, who make money facilitating dubious guardianships. It's essentially legalized elder abuse. I felt like I might vomit. How did you get these recordings? That's what I do, Mrs. Whitfield. I document evidence. But let me back up and answer your earlier question. Who hired me? She pulled out a business card and handed it to me. Jennifer Morrison. Damien's ex-wife? Jennifer? I stared at the card in confusion. But she and Damien divorced over a year ago. Why would she? Because she knows exactly what kind of man your son is, Patricia said bluntly. And when she heard through mutual friends that Damien had gotten engaged to someone like Catalina, someone clearly motivated by money and status, she got worried. She knows his patterns, his financial irresponsibility, his tendency to take the easy way out when he's in trouble.
Jennifer called me 3 weeks ago, Patricia continued. She said she had a bad feeling about this new relationship, especially after she heard that Damien had been asking mutual acquaintances about guardianship law and elder care. She asked me to do some discreet surveillance, just to make sure you were safe. My eyes filled with tears. Jennifer, my former daughter-in-law, who I'd lost contact with after the divorce, who I'd assumed had moved on with her life and forgotten about us, had been protecting me. Jennifer didn't want to contact you directly, Patricia explained. She thought if Damien found out she was interfering, he might accelerate his timeline or change tactics. She wanted hard evidence first, proof that would stand up in court if necessary. And you found it, I whispered. More than I expected to, honestly. Your son and his fiancée haven't been particularly careful about their conversations. They seem to think because they're in his home, they're safe from observation. They don't close curtains. They don't lower their voices. It's been remarkably easy to document their planning. Patricia pulled out a thick manila folder from her bag. This is everything I've gathered over the past 3 weeks. Video recordings, audio transcripts, photographs of documents I was able to capture through Windows. Leonard Morrison isn't as careful as he should be about leaving sensitive papers lying around. It's all here. The entire conspiracy. I took the folder with shaking hands and opened it. Inside were dozens of pages, transcripts of conversations, screenshots of text messages between Damien and Catalina discussing their project, their code word for taking control of my assets, financial records showing Damien's debts, over $300,000 in credit card debt, car loans, and a second mortgage on the townhouse I didn't even know existed, and a detailed timeline of their planning. My God, this goes back months. They started planning this before they even got engaged. Actually, I think the engagement is part of the plan. Look at page 12. I flipped to the indicated page and found a screenshot of a text conversation between Catalina and someone named Brittany. Catalina. Finally getting what I've been working toward. Damien proposed last night. Brittany. Congrats, babe. So the old lady must be loaded. Catalina. House worth $850K minimum. Successful business, investments. Probably $2 million in total assets. And she's 70 with no husband to protect her. Perfect target. Damn, you're cold, LOL. I love it. When do you get access to the money? Working on it. Damien's got a lawyer helping us set up guardianship. Should have everything liquidated by spring. Then I can finally get out of this boring suburban life and move back to LA where I belong. What about Damien? You actually gonna marry him? God, no. Soon as we have the money, I'm gone. He's so pathetic, totally under my control. Makes it almost too easy. I stared at the text exchange, feeling something crack inside my chest. My son wasn't just betraying me. He was being played by someone who viewed him as nothing more than a tool to steal from his own mother. Does Damien know, I asked, that she's planning to leave him once they have my money?
Patricia shook her head. I don't think so. Based on everything I've observed, your son genuinely believes Catalina loves him. He thinks they're building a life together. He's convinced himself that taking your assets is somehow in your best interest, that he's helping you while also solving his financial problems. It's a rationalization, but I think he believes it. That doesn't make it any better. No, Patricia agreed, it doesn't. But it might matter when you decide what to do next. I looked up from the folder. What I do next? Mrs. Whitfield, you have a choice here. You can take this evidence to the police right now. What they're planning constitutes attempted fraud, conspiracy to commit elder abuse, possibly extortion, depending on how the law interprets their tactics. They could face criminal charges. Or, Patricia's expression was carefully neutral, or you can use this information strategically. Let them continue with their plan, but on your terms. Document their attempts at manipulation. Let them think they're succeeding. And when the time is right, you expose them completely. Not just to law enforcement, but to everyone. Family, friends, the community. You destroy not just their plan,
but their reputations, their futures, their ability to ever try something like this again. The idea sent a chill down my spine. That sounds like revenge. That sounds like justice, Patricia corrected. Criminal charges might get them a few months in jail, maybe probation, but completely dismantling their lives, making sure everyone knows what they tried to do, that's a consequence they'd never escape. I sat in silence for a long moment, the folder heavy in my lap. Part of me wanted to go straight to the police, to end this nightmare immediately. But another part, a part I didn't know existed until that moment, wanted something more. I wanted Damien to understand the magnitude of what he'd done. I wanted Catalina to face real consequences for her cruelty. I wanted everyone who'd facilitated the scheme to be exposed. What would it look like, letting them continue? Patricia leaned back in the passenger seat. First, we'd need to protect your assets. Transfer your house into an irrevocable trust that can't be touched even with guardianship. Same with your business. Restructure it legally so that even if they somehow succeeded in getting control of you, they couldn't liquidate your life's work. I know an excellent estate attorney who specializes in asset protection. Then what? Then you play along. You let them think their plan is working. You agree to visit that senior living facility, Serenity Gardens. You act concerned about your memory. Maybe let yourself seem a little confused in front of them. You give them enough rope to hang themselves. While you document everything, I said, understanding now. While I document everything, Patricia confirmed. Every manipulation, every lie, every attempt to coerce you into signing documents or making decisions against your interest. And when we have enough evidence, when their guilt is absolutely undeniable, we spring the trap. How? Patricia smiled, and it was sharp as a knife. That depends on what kind of justice you want, Mrs. Whitfield. But I've been doing this work for 20 years, and I've learned that the most powerful weapon isn't the law, it's exposure. These people operate in the shadows, counting on secrecy and shame to protect them. But when you drag them into the light, when you make sure everyone knows what they've done, that's when they truly lose everything. I thought about Damien's face last night, the way he'd hugged me at the door and whispered that he loved me. I thought about how he'd weaponized my own son's affection, turned my maternal love into a tool for my own exploitation. And I thought about Catalina, with her designer clothes and her fake concern, texting her friend about what a perfect target I was, planning to abandon my son the moment she'd stolen everything from us. How long would it take, I asked, to protect my assets legally? If we move fast? A week? Maybe 2? My attorney contact is excellent. He can expedite the trust paperwork and business restructuring. And they won't notice? Damien has been watching my finances, I'm sure of it. Not if we're careful, Patricia said. The beauty of proper legal asset protection is that from the outside, nothing changes. You still live in your house. You still run your business. The only difference is that legally, those assets are protected in ways they can't touch. And by the time they realize what you've done, it'll be too late. I looked down at the folder again, at all that evidence of betrayal and greed. Then I looked up at Patricia Vance, this stranger who'd been protecting me for weeks without my knowledge. "Why are you doing this?" I asked. "Yes, Jennifer hired you, but this feels like more than just a job." Patricia's expression softened slightly. My mother was a victim of guardianship abuse. Similar situation. My brother convinced a court she was incompetent, took control of her finances, sold her house. By the time I found out what was happening, she'd been moved into a nursing facility she hated, and all her assets were gone. She died 6 months later, and I'm convinced it was from a broken heart more than anything else. "I'm so sorry," I whispered. "I couldn't save my mother," Patricia said quietly,
But I'll be damned if I let the same thing happen to another elderly person if I can prevent it. So yes, Jennifer hired me, but at this point, I do this for free. Because what your son and his fiancée are planning is evil, and they need to be stopped. We sat in silence for a moment, two women bound by similar pain and determination. All right, I said finally. Tell me what I need to do.
Patricia shook her head. I don't think so. Based on everything I've observed, your son genuinely believes Catalina loves him. He thinks they're building a life together. He's convinced himself that taking your assets is somehow in your best interest, that he's helping you while also solving his financial problems. It's a rationalization, but I think he believes it. That doesn't make it any better. No, Patricia agreed, it doesn't. But it might matter when you decide what to do next. I looked up from the folder. What I do next? Mrs. Whitfield, you have a choice here. You can take this evidence to the police right now. What they're planning constitutes attempted fraud, conspiracy to commit elder abuse, possibly extortion, depending on how the law interprets their tactics. They could face criminal charges. Or, Patricia's expression was carefully neutral, or you can use this information strategically. Let them continue with their plan, but on your terms. Document their attempts at manipulation. Let them think they're succeeding. And when the time is right, you expose them completely. Not just to law enforcement, but to everyone. Family, friends, the community. You destroy not just their plan, but their reputations, their futures, their ability to ever try something like this again. The idea sent a chill down my spine. That sounds like revenge. That sounds like justice, Patricia corrected. Criminal charges might get them a few months in jail, maybe probation, but completely dismantling their lives, making sure everyone knows what they tried to do, that's a consequence they'd never escape. I sat in silence for a long moment, the folder heavy in my lap. Part of me wanted to go straight to the police, to end this nightmare immediately. But another part, a part I didn't know existed until that moment, wanted something more. I wanted Damien to understand the magnitude of what he'd done. I wanted Catalina to face real consequences for her cruelty. I wanted everyone who'd facilitated the scheme to be exposed. What would it look like, letting them continue? Patricia leaned back in the passenger seat. First, we'd need to protect your assets. Transfer your house into an irrevocable trust that can't be touched even with guardianship. Same with your business. Restructure it legally so that even if they somehow succeeded in getting control of you, they couldn't liquidate your life's work. I know an excellent estate attorney who specializes in asset protection. Then what? Then you play along. You let them think their plan is working. You agree to visit that senior living facility, Serenity Gardens. You act concerned about your memory. Maybe let yourself seem a little confused in front of them. You give them enough rope to hang themselves. While you document everything, I said, understanding now. While I document everything, Patricia confirmed. Every manipulation, every lie, every attempt to coerce you into signing documents or making decisions against your interest. And when we have enough evidence, when their guilt is absolutely undeniable, we spring the trap. How? Patricia smiled, and it was sharp as a knife. That depends on what kind of justice you want, Mrs. Whitfield. But I've been doing this work for 20 years, and I've learned that the most powerful weapon isn't the law, it's exposure. These people operate in the shadows, counting on secrecy and shame to protect them. But when you drag them into the light, when you make sure everyone knows what they've done, that's when they truly lose everything. I thought about Damien's face last night, the way he'd hugged me at the door and whispered that he loved me.
I thought about how he'd weaponized my own son's affection, turned my maternal love into a tool for my own exploitation. And I thought about Catalina, with her designer clothes and her fake concern, texting her friend about what a perfect target I was, planning to abandon my son the moment she'd stolen everything from us. How long would it take, I asked, to protect my assets legally? If we move fast? A week? Maybe 2? My attorney contact is excellent. He can expedite the trust paperwork and business restructuring. And they won't notice? Damien has been watching my finances, I'm sure of it. Not if we're careful, Patricia said. The beauty of proper legal asset protection is that from the outside, nothing changes. You still live in your house, you still run your business. The only difference is that legally, those assets are protected in ways they can't touch. And by the time they realize what you've done, it'll be too late. I looked down at the folder again, at all that evidence of betrayal and greed. Then I looked up at Patricia Vance, this stranger who'd been protecting me for weeks, without my knowledge. "Why are you doing this?" I asked. "Yes, Jennifer hired you, but this feels like more than just a job." Patricia's expression softened slightly. My mother was a victim of guardianship abuse. Similar situation. My brother convinced a court she was incompetent, took control of her finances, sold her house. By the time I found out what was happening, she'd been moved into a nursing facility she hated, and all her assets were gone. She died 6 months later, and I'm convinced it was from a broken heart more than anything else. "I'm so sorry," I whispered. "I couldn't save my mother," Patricia said quietly, "but I'll be damned if I let the same thing happen to another elderly person if I can prevent it. So yes, Jennifer hired me, but at this point, I do this for free, because what your son and his fiancée are planning is evil, and they need to be stopped." We sat in silence for a moment, 2 women bound by similar pain and determination. "All right," I said finally. "Tell me what I need to do."
Over the next hour, Patricia laid out a detailed plan. First, I'd meet with her attorney contact, a man named Stuart Goldstein, who specialized in elder law and asset protection. He'd help me create an irrevocable trust for my house and restructure my business ownership in ways that would make it legally impossible for anyone to liquidate my assets, even with guardianship. Second, I'd continue interacting with Damien and Catalina normally. I'd seem to consider their suggestions about Serenity Gardens. I'd maybe even agree to visit the facility, to meet with Dr. Brennan for an evaluation. The key was to make them think their plan was working. Third, Patricia would continue surveillance, documenting every step of their conspiracy. Every meeting with Leonard Morrison, every conversation about my assets, every manipulation tactic they employed. "And when do we expose them?" I asked. "When the timing is perfect," Patricia said. "When they're so confident in their success that they don't see it coming. When the betrayal is most complete and undeniable. That's when we show the world who they really are." "How will we do that?" Patricia's smile returned. "Leave that to me. I have some ideas. But, Mrs. Whitfield, I need to know, are you prepared for the fallout? This won't just affect Damien and Catalina. Your other children will find out what their brother tried to do. Your friends, your clients, your community, everyone will know. And once this becomes public, there's no taking it back." I thought about that. About the shame, the gossip, the pity. About becoming known as the woman whose own son tried to rob her. But then I thought about every other elderly person out there, vulnerable and alone, who might fall victim to similar schemes. I thought about Patricia's mother, dying in a nursing facility while her assets were stolen by her own child. And I thought about my daughters, Michaela and Zara, who needed to know what their brother had become before he tried to manipulate them too. "I'm prepared," I said firmly. "But I want my daughters to hear it from me first, before any public exposure. They deserve to know the truth directly, not from gossip or news reports." "Agreed," Patricia said. "In fact, we should probably bring them in on the plan.
Having their support will make you stronger, and it prevents Damien from trying to use them against you. She was right. I pulled out my phone. I'll call them today, ask them to come visit. I'll tell them everything. Patricia nodded approvingly. Then she reached into her bag and pulled out a small device, about the size of a button. One more thing. This is a recording device. It's completely legal in California to record conversations you're a part of. I want you to wear this whenever you're meeting with Damien or Catalina. It'll capture everything they say, every manipulation tactic, every lie, your own personal documentation. I took the tiny device, turning it over in my fingers. It felt like such a small thing to carry such enormous power. Mrs. Whitfield, Patricia said seriously, once you start down this path, it's going to be difficult. You're going to have to watch your son lie to your face. You're going to have to pretend you don't know what he's planning. You're going to have moments where you doubt yourself, where you wonder if maybe you should just forgive him and move on. Are you absolutely sure you want to do this? I looked at her. This woman who'd become my unexpected ally, my co-conspirator in fighting back against those who'd tried to make me a victim. I've spent my entire adult life putting my children first, sacrificing my own needs, my own happiness, my own dreams so they could thrive. I buried my husband and built a business from nothing to provide for them. I worked 2 jobs during their teenage years. I paid for colleges and weddings and emergency expenses. I've given everything I had. I paused, feeling something hard and resolute settling into place inside me. And now my son, my own child, has looked at everything I've built and decided it should be his? He's not asking, he's not negotiating, he's conspiring to take it by force, to have me take dignity. He's treating me like an obstacle to be removed rather than a person to be respected. I looked Patricia directly in the eyes. So yes, I'm absolutely sure. Because if I don't fight back, if I just let this happen, then I'm telling my son and every other person who might try something similar that elderly people are acceptable targets, that we're too weak or too scared to defend ourselves, that our lives and our life's work don't matter. I took a deep breath. I won't be that person. I won't be that victim. So let's do this. Let's show them exactly what happens when they underestimate Margaret Eleanor Whitfield. Patricia's smile was fierce and proud. Then welcome to the fight, Mrs. Whitfield. I have a feeling your son is about to learn a very expensive lesson about respecting his elders. We spent another 30 minutes going over details, when I'd meet with Stuart Goldstein, Tuesday morning, how to use the recording device, simple button activation, and what to say if Damien called. Act normally, maybe mention feeling a little tired lately, set the stage for their narrative of decline. Finally, Patricia handed me her card. That's my direct number. Call anytime, day or night. If anything feels wrong or unsafe, if they escalate their pressure, if you just need to talk to someone who knows what you're going through, call me. Thank you, I said, and the words felt inadequate for what this woman had done for me. Not just for the investigation, but for believing I was worth protecting.
Mrs. Whitfield, Patricia said gently, anyone who meets you can see you're worth protecting. Your son's betrayal isn't a reflection of your value, it's a reflection of his character. After she left, I sat in my car for a long time, the folder of evidence on the seat beside me, the recording device in my palm. The morning sun had burned away the clouds, leaving the sky bright and clear. I felt like I'd woken up from a nightmare into a different kind of nightmare, one where I was conscious, aware, and fighting back. My phone buzzed, a text from Damien. Hey, Mom, hope you got home safely last night. Been thinking about our conversation. Maybe we could visit Serenity Gardens together this week? Would love to show you how nice it is. Love you. I stared at the message for a long moment. Then I typed back, that sounds lovely, sweetheart. I've been thinking too. Maybe you're right about my needing to make some changes. Let's talk soon. Love you too. The lie tasted bitter, but it was necessary. Because the game had changed. I wasn't their target anymore. I was their hunter. And they had no idea what was coming. The next 72 hours were the longest of my life.
Every interaction with Damien felt like walking through a minefield, knowing one wrong step could expose what I'd learned. But I'd spent 70 decades learning to hide my feelings when necessary, and now that skill became my greatest weapon. Tuesday morning, I met Stuart Goldstein at his office in downtown Riverside. He was exactly what I needed. Mid-60s, silver beard, sharp eyes behind wire-rimmed glasses, and an air of quiet competence that immediately put me at ease. "Mrs. Whitfield," he said, shaking my hand firmly, "Patricia has briefed you on your situation. I'm very sorry you're going through this, but I want you to know we're going to make sure your assets are completely protected." Over the next 3 hours, Stuart walked me through the legal protections he could put in place. An irrevocable trust for my house, making it legally impossible for anyone, even with guardianship, to force a sale. A complete restructuring of Whitfield Events, transferring ownership to a family-limited partnership with my daughters as equal partners, effectively removing it from my personal assets while still allowing me to run it. The beauty of these arrangements, Stuart explained, is that they're completely legal and legitimate. You're not hiding assets or engaging in fraud. You're simply organizing your estate in a way that protects it from exploitation. By the time your son realizes what you've done, it'll be too late for him to challenge it. "How long before everything is finalized?" I asked. "I can have the initial documents ready for your signature by Thursday. The full legal transfer will take about 10 days, but once you sign, the protections are in effect. Your house and business will be untouchable." I felt a weight lift from my chest. "Thank you, Stuart. You have no idea what this means to me." His expression softened. "Actually, I do. I've been practicing elder law for 30 years, Mrs. Whitfield. I've seen what happens when families prey on their own elderly members. It's one of the cruelest forms of abuse because it violates the most basic trust, the trust between parent and child. What your son is attempting is unconscionable." "He's convinced himself it's for my own good," I said quietly. "That's what makes it so painful. Part of him genuinely believes he's helping me." That's how they rationalize it. They tell themselves they're being practical, protective, responsible. But at the end of the day, they're stealing. And they need to face consequences. That afternoon, I called my daughters, both of them, Michaela in Seattle, Zara in Phoenix. I asked them both to come home for the weekend, told them it was urgent, that I needed to see them, that I couldn't explain over the phone. "Mom, you're scaring me," Michaela said. "Are you sick? Is something wrong?" "I'm fine, sweetheart, I promise, but I need you here, both of you. Please." They arrived Friday evening, within an hour of each other. Michaela came straight from the airport, her carry-on still in hand. Zara drove her rental car into my driveway just as the sun was setting, casting long shadows across the lawn that Damien wanted me to give up because it was too much maintenance. I'd prepared dinner, nothing fancy, just chicken parmesan and salad, comfort food, but my hands shook as I set the table. How do you tell your children that their brother is trying to rob you? "Okay, Mom," Zara said, once we were all seated. She was my middle child, 38, with her father's analytical mind and my stubborn streak. "You've got us both here. What's going on? And please don't tell me you're selling the house because I swear I'll lose it." I took a deep breath. "I need to show you something, but I need you both to promise you'll hear me out completely before you react." Michaela reached across the table and took my hand. She was my oldest, 41, with gentle eyes and the kind of empathy that made her an excellent therapist. "Mom, whatever it is, we're here. Just tell us." So I did. I started with the dinner at Damien's house, the mysterious text warning, the hidden camera in the centerpiece. I watched their faces shift from confusion to disbelief to horror as I described Patricia's investigation, the video evidence, Leonard Morrison's advice about how to steal from me legally. When I got to the part about Catalina's text messages, calling me a perfect target, planning to leave Damien once they had my money, Zara stood up so abruptly her chair scraped against the floor. "That son of a bitch," she said, her voice shaking with fury. "That absolute son of a bitch. How could he? How could Damien do this to you?"
Michaela was crying silently, tears streaming down her face. "I can't believe it. I mean, I know you're showing us evidence. I know it's real. But I just can't wrap my mind around Damien being capable of this. There's more, I said quietly, and pulled out the folder Patricia had given me. For the next hour, we went through everything. Every video, every transcript, every piece of evidence documenting the conspiracy. By the end, both my daughters looked like they'd been physically struck. "We have to go to the police," Zara said immediately. "Right now. This is fraud, conspiracy, attempted elder abuse." "We will," I interrupted gently, "but not yet." "What do you mean, not yet?" Michaela asked. "Mom, every day we wait is another day they could try something." "My assets are already protected," I explained. "Stuart Goldstein has set up trusts and restructured the business. They can't touch anything even if they somehow succeeded in getting guardianship, which they won't because we're going to stop them. But I don't want to just stop them. I want them to face real consequences." I told them about Patricia's suggestion, letting Damien and Catalina continue thinking their plan was working, documenting every manipulation, every lie, every attempt to coerce me into giving up my life. And then we expose them, not just to the police, but publicly, to everyone, so that Damien has to face what he's done, not just legally, but socially, professionally, personally, so that Catalina's cruelty is documented for the world to see, so that Leonard Morrison and Dr. Brennan and everyone else who facilitated this faces consequences too. Zara was nodding slowly. "You want to destroy them?" "I want justice," I corrected. "And yes, part of that is making sure they can never do this to anyone else. Never use their respectable facades to prey on vulnerable people." Michaela wiped her eyes. "What do you need from us?" "I need you both here. Not all the time. I know you have your own lives. But available. Ready to testify if necessary. Ready to support me when this all comes out. And I need you to pretend when you talk to Damien that you don't know anything. Can you do that?" They looked at each other, then back at me. "Yes," they said in unison. "There's one more thing," I said quietly. "When this is over, I'm going to lose my son. Maybe not permanently. Maybe someday he'll understand the magnitude of what he tried to do, and we can rebuild something. But right now, when I expose him, I'm choosing justice over my relationship with my child. And I need to know I'm not alone in that choice." Michaela came around the table and wrapped me in a fierce hug. "You're not alone, Mom. You'll never be alone. What Damien tried to do, that's not love. That's not family. You deserve better." Zara joined the hug, the three of us standing there in my kitchen where I'd fed them countless meals, bandaged countless scraped knees, celebrated countless victories, and mourned countless losses. "We're with you," Zara said firmly. "Whatever comes next, we're with you." Over the next 2 weeks, I played my role perfectly. I visited Serenity Gardens with Damien and Catalina, touring the facility while the recording device Patricia had given me captured every manipulation. "See, Mom?" Damien said, gesturing to the common area where elderly residents sat watching television or playing cards. "Everyone here seems so happy, so well cared for." They looked drugged to me, sedated, waiting to die in this sterile facility that smelled of industrial cleaner and resignation. "It's very nice," I said carefully, letting my voice carry just a hint of uncertainty. "But it's so expensive. I'm not sure I can afford." "That's what the house sale is for. Once we sell your property, you'll have more than enough to cover the costs here for the rest of your life. And won't it be such a relief to not worry about maintenance and bills and all those stressful things?"
I let them guide me through the facility, nodding at appropriate moments, asking the questions they wanted me to ask, all while the recording device in my collar captured their careful manipulation. That evening, they took me to dinner. Another opportunity to record them, to document their systematic effort to convince me to give up everything. "I've been thinking about the business, too," I said carefully over dessert, watching them lean forward eagerly. "Maybe you're right that I should consider selling. I have been feeling more tired lately." I hadn't been feeling tired at all, but they needed to believe their plan was working. "Oh, Mom, that's such a mature decision," Damien said, reaching across the table to squeeze my hand. "I'm so proud of you for being realistic about your limitations." My limitations, as if running a successful business at 70 was a limitation rather than an accomplishment. "We should probably meet with that attorney you mentioned," I continued carefully, naming Leonard Morrison even though the words tasted like poison, "to discuss the legal aspects of everything." I watched Catalina and Damien exchange a quick glance. Triumph, satisfaction, greed. They thought they were winning. "That's a great idea, Mrs. Whitfield," Catalina said warmly. "We'll set that up for next week. Leonard is wonderful. He'll make sure everything is handled properly." The meeting with Leonard Morrison was scheduled for the following Tuesday. Patricia had coached me extensively on what to expect, how to respond, what to watch for. "She's going to try to get you to sign preliminary documents, powers of attorney, healthcare directives, maybe even initial guardianship consent forms disguised as estate planning. Don't sign anything. Tell him you want your own lawyer to review everything first. That's completely reasonable, and he can't push back without revealing his true intentions."
What if he does push back? I asked. Then we have him on tape being coercive with an elderly client, which is exactly the kind of evidence we need to go after his law license. Leonard Morrison's office was in a gleaming high-rise in downtown Riverside, all glass and steel and expensive furniture. He was exactly what I expected. Mid-50s, expensive suit, practiced smile that didn't reach his eyes, and the kind of smooth charm that probably worked on people who didn't know what he really was. "Mrs. Whitfield, what a pleasure to meet you," he said, shaking my hand. His grip was firm, just short of aggressive. "Your son has told me so much about you. Please, sit down." Damien and Catalina flanked me on the leather sofa, like guards making sure I didn't escape. The recording device was active in my collar, capturing everything. "Now then," Leonard began, pulling out a stack of documents. "Damien has explained that you're interested in some estate planning and possibly exploring guardianship options to ensure you're properly cared for as you age. Is that correct?" "I'm considering my options," I said carefully. "My son is concerned about my living situation." "A very loving concern," Leonard said smoothly. "It's wonderful when families are proactive about these matters. Now, I've prepared several documents for your review. First, a durable power of attorney that would give Damien authority to manage your financial affairs if you become unable to do so yourself. He slid the document across his mahogany desk. I picked it up, pretending to read it carefully. "This is very comprehensive," I said slowly. "It seems to give Damien control over everything. My bank accounts, my property, my business." "Only if you become incapacitated," Leonard assured me. "But having it in place now means there's no scrambling to get court orders if something happens. It's simply good planning." "I'd like to have my own attorney review this," I said. Leonard's smile tightened almost imperceptibly. "Of course, though I should mention that many banks and financial institutions prefer documents prepared by the attorney who'll be filing them. If you have this reviewed and revised by another lawyer, it might cause delays when you actually need to use it." That was a lie.
Banks didn't care who prepared the documents as long as they were legally valid. Nevertheless, I said firmly, I'd like my attorney to look at it. Stuart Goldstein. Do you know him? I watched Leonard's face. If he knew Stuart's reputation for protecting elderly clients from exploitation, he'd recognize the threat immediately. His expression didn't change, but something flickered in his eyes. Stuart Goldstein. Yes, I'm familiar with his work. He's very thorough. That's why I hired him, I said pleasantly. We went through the rest of the documents, healthcare directives, preliminary guardianship consent forms, exactly as Patricia had predicted, and authorizations for Leonard to access my medical and financial records. These are all quite standard, Leonard kept saying, just routine estate planning that any responsible person your age should have in place. I'm sure they are, and I'll have Stuart review them all carefully before I sign anything. By the end of the meeting, Leonard's frustration was barely concealed. He'd expected to walk away with signed documents giving Damien immediate access to my assets. Instead, he had nothing. Mom, I really think you should trust Leonard's expertise, Damien said as we walked to the parking garage. He specializes in elder law. He knows what's best. I do trust him, I lied smoothly, but Stuart has been my attorney for years. It would be disrespectful not to include him in major decisions like this. I could see Catalina calculating behind her perfect makeup. This wasn't going to according to plan. They needed to escalate. It happened 3 days later. I received a call from Dr. Sarah Brennan's office, the nurse practitioner Catalina had conspired with. Miss Whitfield, Dr. Brennan would like to schedule a comprehensive wellness evaluation for you. Your son Damien arranged it as a gift. He's very concerned about your health. A gift? I repeated flatly. Yes, ma'am. We have an opening tomorrow at 2 o'clock, if that works for your schedule. I should have refused, but this was exactly the kind of escalation Patricia had predicted. They were moving forward with getting medical testimony about my supposed incompetence. Tomorrow at 2 is fine. I'll be there. I called Patricia immediately. They're trying to get me evaluated. The fake doctor Catalina conspired with. Perfect, Patricia said, and I could hear the satisfaction in her voice. Go to the appointment. Answer all her questions honestly. You'll ace every cognitive test she gives you, which will make it very difficult for her to claim later that you're incompetent. And wear the recording device. If she tries to lead you toward answers that suggest cognitive decline, we'll have evidence of medical malpractice. The appointment was exactly as suspicious as I expected. Dr. Brennan was professionally friendly, but I could see her trying to maneuver me into responses that would support a narrative of decline. Mrs. Whitfield, your son mentioned you've been having some memory issues. Can you tell me about that? I haven't been having memory issues. I'm not sure why Damien would say that. A flicker of annoyance crossed her face. Well, let's do some cognitive screening just to be thorough. Can you tell me what day it is today?
Friday, November 3rd, 2024. And who is the current president? I answered every question perfectly, remembered lists of words, drew clock faces with correct times, solved simple math problems. Every cognitive test she threw at me, I passed with flying colors. Well, Dr. Brennan said finally, unable to hide her frustration, you certainly seem very sharp today. I'm sharp every day, I said pleasantly, because I'm not actually experiencing cognitive decline. I'm a healthy 70-year-old woman with no dementia, no memory loss, and no need for guardianship. Her eyes narrowed. Guardianship? Who said anything about guardianship? Isn't that what this is about? I asked innocently, my son arranging for medical evaluations to document my supposed incompetence. I'm not sure what you mean, Mrs. Whitfield. This is just a routine wellness check. Of course it is, I said, standing up. Well, thank you for your time, doctor.
Or should I say, nurse practitioner Brennan. I'm sure we'll be speaking again soon, perhaps in a deposition. I walked out before she could respond, the recording device in my collar having captured every moment of her attempted manipulation. That evening, Patricia called. They're panicking. I've been monitoring Damien's communications. They know you're not cooperating the way they expected. They're going to make their move soon. What kind of move? I think they're going to try for emergency guardianship, claim you're in immediate danger of self-harm or financial exploitation. It's a desperate play, but if they can convince a judge that you're in crisis, they could get temporary authority over your assets before you have time to fight it. My blood ran cold. Can they do that? They can try, but Mrs. Whitfield, this is actually good news. The more desperate and aggressive they get, the more evidence we have of malicious intent. Let them make their move. We'll be ready. The emergency guardianship petition came 48 hours later. Damien and Catalina, represented by Leonard Morrison, filed paperwork claiming I was suffering from severe cognitive decline, was in danger of being scammed, couldn't manage my basic needs, and required immediate intervention. The hearing was scheduled for the following Friday, just 10 days away. "This is it," Patricia said when I called her in tears. "This is when we strike back." Over the next week, we prepared our counterattack. Stuart Goldstein filed a response to the petition, including my recent cognitive evaluation results from a legitimate doctor Patricia had arranged, documentation of my successful business operations, and affidavits from friends and clients attesting to my mental competence. But we held back the biggest weapon, the evidence of the conspiracy itself. We were saving that for the hearing. "We want them confident," Patricia explained. "We want them to walk into that courtroom thinking they're going to win, and then we're going to destroy them in front of a judge, on the record, in a way that can never be erased." The night before the hearing, my daughters arrived. Michaela had taken a week off work. Zara had told her husband she didn't know when she'd be back to Phoenix. We sat in my kitchen, the same kitchen where I'd told them about the conspiracy, and prepared for battle. "Are you ready for this, Mom?" Michaela asked gently. "Once we do this tomorrow, there's no going back. Your relationship with Damien will never be the same." I thought about my son as a little boy, the way he'd hug me so tight when he was scared, the way he'd bring me dandelions and call them roses. I thought about the man he'd become, or maybe the man he'd always been underneath, just waiting for the right circumstances to reveal his true character. "He made this choice," I said quietly. "Not me. He decided to see his own mother as nothing more than a source of money to be exploited. He conspired to take everything I've worked for, to have me declared incompetent, to strip away my dignity and autonomy. That's not love. That's not family. That's predatory behavior." "He's going to be destroyed tomorrow," Zara warned. "Professionally, socially, legally. Are you prepared for that?" I met her eyes. "Are you prepared for me to be robbed, declared incompetent, and locked in a facility against my will? Because that's the alternative. Those are the only two options here. I destroy him, or he destroys me." "Then let's destroy him," Michaela said firmly. The courtroom was smaller than I expected. Wood paneling, fluorescent lights, a tired-looking judge who'd probably heard a dozen cases already that morning. Damien and Catalina sat at one table with Leonard Morrison, all three of them dressed professionally and wearing expressions of concerned family members just trying to help a beloved mother. I sat at the other table with Stuart Goldstein, flanked by my daughters. Patricia sat in the gallery, her recording equipment and evidence folders ready. Judge Rebecca Martinez called the hearing to order. "We're here on a petition for emergency guardianship filed by Mr. Damien Whitfield on behalf of his mother, Margaret Whitfield. Mr. Morrison, you're representing the petitioner." "Yes, Your Honor," Leonard said smoothly. "We appreciate the court's time today. This is a difficult situation for everyone involved, but my client is deeply concerned about his mother's safety and well-being." For the next 30 minutes, Leonard presented their case, medical concerns based on Dr. Brennan's evaluation. financial worries, claiming I'd nearly fallen for a phone scam that never happened, safety issues, the dangerous stairs in my house, the overwhelming business responsibilities.
Mrs. Whitfield is 70 years old, Leonard said, his voice dripping with false sympathy. She's worked hard her entire life, and she deserves to rest and be cared for. But she's refusing to acknowledge her limitations. She's putting herself at risk by continuing to live alone and run a demanding business. My client isn't trying to take control of his mother's life. He's trying to save it. It was a masterful performance. If I didn't know the truth, I might have believed he was genuinely concerned. Then it was Stuart's turn. "Your Honor," Stuart began, and his voice was steel wrapped in velvet. "What we've heard today is a carefully constructed fiction designed to steal an elderly woman's assets. With the court's permission, I'd like to present evidence that will demonstrate this petition is not about care or concern. It's about fraud." Judge Martinez leaned forward, suddenly very interested. "Proceed, Mr. Goldstein." Stuart nodded to Patricia, who stood and began distributing folders to the judge, to Leonard, to Damien, and Catalina. I watched my son's face as he opened the folder and saw the first page, a transcript of his conversation with Leonard Morrison about the timeline for liquidating my assets. The color drained from his face. "Your Honor," Stuart continued, "over the past several weeks, Mrs. Whitfield has been the target of a systematic conspiracy to defraud her of approximately $2 million in assets. The conspirators include her own son, his fiancé, the attorney representing them today, and a nurse practitioner who conducted a fraudulent medical evaluation." "That's a serious accusation, Mr. Goldstein," Judge Martinez said, but she was already reading the documents in front of her. "It's backed by serious evidence, Your Honor. Video recordings of planning sessions, text messages discussing Mrs. Whitfield as a target, and financial records showing Mr. Whitfield's significant debts as motive, and audio recordings of attempts to manipulate Mrs. Whitfield into signing away her rights. For the next hour, we presented everything. Patricia testified about her investigation. We played video footage of Damien and Leonard Morrison discussing how to establish incompetence. We showed text messages of Catalina calling me a perfect target and planning to leave Damien once they had my money. We played the audio from my dinner at Damien's house, where they'd recorded me without my knowledge. And then we played my recordings of subsequent meetings where they tried to manipulate me into visiting facilities and signing documents. I watched Damien's face throughout the presentation. Shock, denial, horror, shame. Emotions flickered across his features like a slideshow of his own destruction. Catalina, by contrast, sat perfectly still, her expression blank. She'd already checked out, I realized. She was calculating her exit strategy. Leonard Morrison looked like he might vomit. His reputation, his career, possibly his law license, it was all crumbling before his eyes. When we finished, Judge Martinez sat in silence for a long moment, reading through the evidence. Then she looked up and her expression was cold fury. "Mr. Morrison," she said, "I've been a judge for 15 years. I've seen a lot of despicable behavior in this courtroom, but this, conspiring to defraud an elderly woman, filing false court documents, attempting to weaponize the guardianship system, this is among the worst." She turned to Damien. "Mr. Whitfield, do you understand that what you've attempted here constitutes elder abuse? That it's a criminal offense in California?" Damien couldn't speak. He just sat there, his mouth opening and closing like a fish drowning in air. "Your Honor," Leonard began, "if I could just explain—" "You can explain to the state bar when they investigate you. Judge Martinez cut him off. "I'm referring this entire matter to the District Attorney's Office for Criminal Investigation. I'm also issuing a restraining order preventing Mr. Damian Whitfield, Miss Catalina Delgado, and Mr. Leonard Morrison from having any contact with Mrs. Margaret Whitfield." She looked at me then, and her expression softened. "Mrs. Whitfield, I'm sorry you've been through this. I'm denying the guardianship petition with prejudice, which means it cannot be refiled. You are clearly competent to manage your own affairs, and I hope you'll pursue every legal remedy available to you against these individuals." "Thank you, Your Honor," I said quietly. "Is there anything else?" the judge asked Stewart. "Just one thing, Your Honor. Mrs. Whitfield would like to make a statement." Judge Martinez nodded. "Proceed." I stood up slowly, my hands shaking, but my voice steady. I looked directly at Damian. "I am your son. I carried you in my body. I held you when you were scared. I sacrificed everything to give you opportunities, education, love. When your father died, I worked myself to exhaustion to make sure you and your sisters had what you needed." Tears were streaming down Damian's face now. "And you looked at everything I built, my home, my business, my independence, and you decided it should be yours. You didn't ask, you didn't negotiate, you conspired to take it by force, to have me declared incompetent, to lock me away in a facility so you could steal from me more easily." My voice cracked, but I pushed forward. "You brought a camera into your home to record me. You lied to doctors about my mental state. You plotted with criminals to rob your own mother. And you did it all while telling me you loved me, while hugging me at your door, while calling me Mom." I paused, letting the weight of those words settle over the courtroom. "I don't know if you can come back from this, Damian. I don't know if our relationship can ever be repaired, but I want you to understand something. This happened because you made a choice. You chose greed over love. You chose money over family. You chose to see your mother as a target rather than a person."
I turned to Catalina. "And you saw an elderly woman and thought perfect victim. You manipulated my son, used his weaknesses against him, and planned to abandon him the moment you got what you wanted. I hope you find whatever it is you're looking for in life, because you clearly don't value human connections." Finally, I looked at Leonard Morrison. "And you weaponized the legal system against vulnerable people. You helped families destroy each other for profit. I hope they strip you of your license. I hope you never practice law again." I sat down, exhausted but unburdened. Judge Martinez dismissed the hearing. As we filed out of the courtroom, I heard Catalina hiss at Damian. "This is your fault. You said she was a helpless old woman. You said this would be easy." "Catalina, please," Damian started. "Don't," she snapped. "We're done. Find yourself another meal ticket." She walked away without looking back, her heels clicking on the marble floor, leaving Damian standing there alone in the courthouse hallway. He looked at me, and for just a moment, I saw my little boy in his eyes, scared, lost, desperate for his mother to tell him everything would be okay. But I couldn't do that. Not anymore. "Mom," he whispered. "Mom, I'm so sorry. I never meant—" "You meant exactly what you did. You planned it. You executed it. You only stopped because you got caught. That's not the same as being sorry." "Please," he said, tears streaming down his face. "Please don't do this. Don't press charges. Don't destroy my life. I'm your son." "You destroyed your own life the moment you decided to destroy mine. And yes, you're my son, which makes what you did even more unforgivable." I walked away, flanked by Michaela and Zara, leaving Damian standing alone in the courthouse where his conspiracy had finally collapsed.
The aftermath was swift and brutal. The district attorney filed criminal charges against Damien, Catalina, and Leonard Morrison, conspiracy to commit elder abuse, attempted fraud, and several other counts. Dr. Sarah Brennan lost her nursing license after an investigation revealed she'd falsified medical evaluations in multiple guardianship cases. Catalina disappeared almost immediately, flew to Los Angeles, and, from what Patricia's sources indicated, was already working on finding her next target. Some people never learn. Leonard Morrison was disbarred. His law practice collapsed. His reputation was destroyed in every legal publication in California. And Damien lost everything. His job after the school district learned about the charges, his townhouse when he couldn't make the mortgage payments, his friends when the story went public. The case made headlines. Local teacher attempts to defraud elderly mother, and became a cautionary tale about elder abuse. 3 months after the hearing, I received a letter from Damien. It was 10 pages long, handwritten, rambling, part confession, part excuse, part plea for forgiveness. I know I don't deserve your forgiveness. I know what I did was unforgivable, but I need you to know I loved you. I still love you. I just got so lost in my own problems, my own debt, my own need to impress Catalina and prove I could provide for her. I convinced myself that you'd be better off in a nice facility, that I was helping you by taking away the stress of managing everything. I know now that was a lie I told myself. I know I was just trying to steal from you. I'm so ashamed, Mom, so ashamed. I read the letter 3 times. Then I put it in a drawer in my desk next to all the other letters Damien had written me over the years. From summer camp, from college, from his honeymoon with Jennifer. I didn't write back. Maybe someday I would. Maybe someday, after he'd served his sentence, the plea deal got him 18 months in prison plus restitution. After he'd done the work to understand what he did and why, after he'd proven through actions rather than words that he'd changed, maybe then we could begin to rebuild something. But not now. The wound was too fresh, the betrayal too deep. 6 months after the hearing, I sat in my kitchen, this kitchen that I still owned, in this house that was still mine, in this life that I'd fought to keep, having breakfast with my daughters and Patricia, who had become a dear friend. How are you doing, Mom? Really doing. I thought about the question. I'd lost my son, at least temporarily. I'd learned that people I loved were capable of unthinkable cruelty. I'd had to fight my own child in court. But I'd learned something else. I'd learned that I was stronger than I thought, that I could fight back when necessary, that I had daughters who stood by me, friends who protected me, and strangers who became allies. I'd learned that being elderly didn't mean being helpless, that at 70, I could still be fierce, strategic, victorious. I'm doing okay, I said honestly. Some days are harder than others. Sometimes I see something that reminds me of Damien when he was little, and it breaks my heart all over again. But then I remember what he tried to do, and I know I made the right choice. You absolutely did, Zara said firmly. He needed to face consequences, and hopefully he learns from them. And if he doesn't? I asked. Then that's on him, Patricia said. You gave him life, raised him, loved him, and gave him every opportunity. What he does with his second chance after prison is his responsibility, not yours. She was right. I knew she was right. But it still hurt. Later that day, I went to Whitfield Events, my business that I still owned, that was thriving more than ever after the publicity from the case brought in new clients who wanted to support an elderly woman who'd fought back against exploitation.
My staff had made a banner, "Welcome back, boss lady." They cheered when I walked in.
I had been working reduced hours since the hearing, taking time to recover emotionally. But today felt different. Today felt like a turning point. All right, everyone, I said, clapping my hands together. We have 3 weddings next month, a corporate gala, and someone wants us to cater a quinceanera for 200 guests. Let's show them what Whitfield Events can do. The energy in the room was electric. My team rallied around me, not out of pity, but out of respect. They'd seen me fight for my independence, and it had inspired them. That evening, I returned the home as the sun was setting, painting my house in shades of gold and amber. I stood in my driveway for a moment, looking at this home that had almost been taken from me. Every window held memories. Every room told a story. The front door where Damien had taken his first steps. The kitchen where I had taught all 3 children to bake cookies. The living room where Roland and I had slow danced on our anniversary, the kids watching and giggling from the hallway. The bedroom where I'd cried myself to sleep after his funeral, wondering how I'd survive without him. This house was more than property. It was my history, my identity, my proof that I'd built something lasting despite every obstacle life had thrown at me. And I'd fought to keep it, successfully. My phone buzzed with a text from Patricia. Dinner next week? There's someone I want you to meet. Another woman going through something similar. I think you could help her. I smiled, typing back, absolutely. What day works? Because that was the thing about surviving betrayal. It didn't just make you stronger, it gave you purpose. I now understood what Patricia had meant when she said she couldn't save her mother, but wouldn't let it happen to others. I couldn't undo what Damien had tried to do to me, but I could use my experience, my story, my victory to help other elderly people who were facing similar threats. Over the following months, I became something I never expected, an advocate. I spoke at senior centers about recognizing the warning signs of financial exploitation. I testified before the state legislature about strengthening guardianship laws and protections. I worked with Patricia to identify other suspicious guardianship cases and connect vulnerable people with resources. The local news did a feature on me. 70-year-old business owner defeats son's attempt to steal her assets. The story went viral. Suddenly, I was receiving emails and letters from people all over the country sharing their own stories of family betrayal, asking for advice, thanking me for speaking up. One letter particularly moved me. It was from a 68-year-old woman in Oregon whose daughter had successfully taken guardianship and sold her home. I wish I'd known what you knew, she wrote. I wish I'd fought back, but reading your story gives me hope that maybe it's not too late to try. I called her that same day. We talked for 2 hours. By the end of the conversation, I'd connected her with an attorney who specialized in reversing fraudulent guardianships. 6 months later, she got her home back. You saved my life, she told me through tears. You literally saved my life. No, I said gently. You saved your own life by deciding to fight. I just showed you it was possible. That became my mission. Showing people it was possible to fight back, to reclaim their power, to refuse to be victims. A year after the hearing, I received another letter from Damien. This one was different, shorter, less about excuses and more about accountability. Mom, it began, I've been in therapy, court-mandated at first, but I've continued it on my own because I needed to understand how I became the person who could do what I did to you. I've learned some hard truths about myself, about my relationship with money, with status, with my own sense of inadequacy, about how I let someone like Catalina manipulate me because I was desperate to believe I could have the life she represented, about how I rationalized stealing from my own mother because facing my own failures was too painful. None of this excuses what I did. Nothing could excuse it. But I wanted you to know that I'm trying to understand it, trying to change, trying to become someone worthy of the mother who raised me. I don't expect forgiveness. I don't even know if I deserve the chance to ask for it someday. But I want you to know that I see what I did. I see the cruelty of it. I see the betrayal. And I'm so, so sorry. Your son, Damien. I sat with that letter for a long time. Then I did something I hadn't done in a year. I wrote back. Damien, thank you for your letter. Damien.
I sat with that letter for a long time. Then doing the work to understand what you did and why. I'm not ready to see you yet. The wound is still too fresh, and I need more time. But I want you to know that I'm proud of you for facing your actions honestly. That's the first step toward becoming the man I raised you to be. Keep doing the work. Keep growing. Keep taking responsibility. And maybe, someday, we can begin to rebuild something. Not what we had, that's gone forever, but perhaps something new, something more honest, something based on the truth of who we both really are, not who we wish we were. I do still love you, Damien, but love isn't enough to overcome what happened. You need to earn back trust, respect, and the right to be in my life. That will take time. Maybe years, maybe forever. I don't know yet. But I'm willing to leave the door open, just a crack, to see if you can walk through it as a changed man. Take care of yourself. Mom.
I sent the letter, then sat in my kitchen and cried. Not from sadness this time, but from something more complex. Grief for what was lost, hope for what might be rebuilt, relief that the worst was over, pride in what I'd survived. 18 months after the hearing, Damien was released from prison. He didn't contact me immediately, which I appreciated. He was giving me space, respecting my boundaries. Michaela told me he'd moved into a small apartment across town, was working 2 jobs to pay his restitution, was still in therapy. He asks about you, Michaela said carefully. Not in the pushy way, just he wants to know if you're okay, if you're happy. What do you tell him? I asked. That you're thriving, she said. Because you are, Mom. You're doing better than I've ever seen you. She was right. At 71, I was busier than ever, running my business, doing advocacy work, traveling with Patricia to conferences about elder abuse prevention, spending time with my daughters and their families. I'd built a life that was fuller and more purposeful than it had been before the betrayal, not because of what Damien did, but because of how I'd chosen to respond to it. 2 years after the hearing, on a cold December morning, I received a text from an unknown number. Mom, this is Damien. I know I'm not supposed to contact you directly. I'm violating the restraining order by sending this. If you want to report me, I'll understand. But I needed to tell you something. I've been sober for 18 months. I'm working as a tutor for at-risk kids. I've paid back all the restitution. And I've spent every single day of the past 2 years trying to become someone who could look you in the eye without feeling crushing shame. I don't know if that day will ever come, but I wanted you to know I'm trying. I love you, I miss you, and I understand if you never want to see me again. But if you ever do, I'll be here. Your son. I stared at the text for a long time. Then I showed it to my daughters, to Patricia, to my therapist. Yes, I'd started seeing one too. Surviving betrayal had taught me the value of professional support. What do you want to do? My therapist asked. I don't know, I admitted. Part of me wants to reach out, but part of me is terrified that if I let him back in even a little, he'll hurt me again. How do I know he's really changed? How can I ever trust him? You probably can't, honestly. Not completely, not the way you did before. But that doesn't mean you can't build something new. Trust doesn't have to be all or nothing. It can be conditional, cautious, earned incrementally over time. That made sense. 3 days later, I texted back, Damien, I'm proud of the work you're doing. I'm glad you're getting help and making positive changes. I'm not ready for a face-to-face meeting yet, but I'm willing to correspond by email or letter, slowly, carefully, with boundaries. If you can respect that, send me an email. Mom. His response came within an hour. Thank you, Mom. Thank you for giving me even this small chance. I'll respect whatever boundaries you set. I love you. We began corresponding. Emails at first, then occasional phone calls. The conversations were awkward, painful sometimes, filled with long silences and difficult truths. But gradually, very gradually, I began to see glimpses of the person Damien was becoming. He was humbler now, more self-aware.
He talked about his therapy revelations, his struggles with ego and entitlement, his understanding of how he'd let external validation become more important than internal values. I spent my whole life trying to look successful, he wrote in one email. Nice car, nice house, impressive girlfriend. I was so focused on the image that I lost track of what actually mattered. And when that house of cards started collapsing, when my debts piled up and Catalina's expectations kept growing, I looked at you and saw the solution to all my problems. I saw your assets, not your humanity. That's the cruelest part. I stopped seeing you as my mother and started seeing you as a resource to be exploited. Reading that was like having a knife twisted in an old wound, but it was also validating. Finally, he understood what he had done. 3 years after the hearing, I agreed to meet him for coffee, just coffee, in a public place, with Patricia sitting at a nearby table, just in case. Damien looked different, older, thinner, with gray at his temples that hadn't been there before. He wore simple clothes, jeans and a plain sweater, no more designer labels trying to project success he didn't have. "Mom," he said when he saw me, and his voice cracked. "Thank you for coming." We sat across from each other, two people bound by blood and history and a betrayal that had nearly destroyed us both. "How are you?" he asked. "I'm good," I said honestly. "Better than good, actually. I'm thriving." He smiled, and there was genuine happiness in it. "I'm glad. You deserve to thrive." We talked for an hour about his work, his continued therapy, his amends process. He had written letters to everyone affected by his actions: Michaela, Zara, Jennifer, even some of my business clients who'd been potential targets in his scheme. "I can't undo what I did," he said finally. "I can't give you back the year of pain and fear and stress. I can't erase the betrayal. All I can do is try to become someone different, someone better, someone who would never even think about doing what I did. Why should I believe you've changed? How do I know this isn't another manipulation?"
Damien looked at me with clear eyes. "You don't. You can't. I could tell you I've changed, but words are cheap. I proved that when I told you I loved you while simultaneously plotting to rob you. The only way you'll know if I've really changed is through my actions over time. Years of actions. Consistent, honest, boundaried actions. And even then, you might never fully trust me again. I've accepted that. This isn't about me earning back what I had. It's about me becoming someone worthy of whatever small relationship you're willing to offer, if any." I sat with that for a moment. Then I said, "I do love you, Damien. I never stopped loving you, even when I hated what you'd done. But love isn't enough to rebuild what you destroyed. You're right. It will take years of consistent action, years of respecting my boundaries, years of proving through behavior, not words, that you've become someone different." "I understand," he said quietly. "And I need you to understand something else. I'm not the same person I was before either. I'm not the mother who'll sacrifice her own well-being to make you comfortable. I'm not going to ignore red flags or excuse bad behavior. I've learned to prioritize my own safety and peace of mind. So if at any point I feel like you're slipping back into old patterns, I will walk away permanently. Do you understand?" "Yes, I understand. And, Mom, that's exactly who you should be. Strong, boundaried, self-protective. I'm proud of you for becoming that person, even though it took my betrayal to get you there." We didn't hug when we parted, didn't make promises about future meetings, just agreed to keep corresponding, to take things slowly, to let time and action speak louder than words. As I drove home, I felt something unexpected. Not forgiveness exactly, but perhaps the beginning of something that might someday become forgiveness, or at least peace. 5 years after the hearing, on my 75th birthday, my daughters threw me a party at my house. This house I'd fought so hard to keep. Friends, clients, fellow advocates filled my home with laughter and love. Damien wasn't there.
We'd agreed he wouldn't attend family gatherings yet. It was too soon, too painful for everyone. But he'd sent a card with a simple message. Happy birthday, Mom. Grateful you're in the world. Grateful you fought back. Grateful you survived. Love, D. I put the card on my mantle, next to photos of my daughter, my grandchildren, my late husband, Roland. Mom, speech! Zara called out, and everyone gathered around. I looked at all these faces, people who loved me, supported me, stood by me through the worst period of my life. Patricia, who'd protected me when I didn't even know I needed protection. Stuart, who'd shielded my assets and my rights. My daughters, who'd never wavered in their support. My friends and clients who'd rallied around me. And everyone who wasn't there. Damien, still earning his way back. Tatalina, off somewhere, probably targeting another victim. Leonard Morrison, disbarred and disgraced. Dr. Brennan, her career destroyed. 5 years ago, I sat at a dinner table in my son's house and received a text message that changed my life. Someone warned me I was being recorded, that I was being set up, that my own child was planning to rob me of everything I'd worked for. The room was silent now, everyone listening. That night, I went home and cried. I felt betrayed, terrified, alone. I thought about giving up, just letting them take what they wanted because fighting back seemed too hard, too painful, too impossible. I paused, looking around at all these strong, beautiful faces. But then I met people who showed me that being 70 years old meant not being helpless, that being elderly didn't mean a victim, that I had the right and the power to fight back, to protect what was mine, to demand respect and dignity. Patricia raised her glass slightly, smiling at me. And I learned something I wish I'd known my whole life, that sometimes the most loving thing you can do is set boundaries, that sometimes protecting yourself isn't selfish, it's necessary, that sometimes the people you love will hurt you and you have to choose yourself anyway. My voice grew stronger. What happened to me happens to elderly people every day. Family members who see their parents not as people, but as sources of money. Lawyers who weaponize the legal system against vulnerable seniors. Medical professionals who falsify evaluations to support fraudulent guardianship claims. It's an epidemic, and it thrives on shame and silence. So I refuse to be ashamed. I refuse to be silent. Yes, my son tried to rob me. Yes, I had to fight him in court. Yes, I exposed his conspiracy to the world. And I'd do it all again because justice matters more than comfort, and truth matters more than keeping up appearances. The room erupted in applause. Thank you all for being here. Thank you for supporting me, believing in me, and showing me that life after betrayal can be even more beautiful than life before it. Not because the betrayal was good, it wasn't, but because surviving it showed me who I really am. And I like that person. I'm proud of that person. I raised my glass higher. So here's to being 75 years old, still running my business, still fighting for elder rights, still choosing joy and purpose and meaning every single day. Here's to refusing to be a victim, and here's to all of you who made that possible. Thank you. We toasted, and I felt something I hadn't felt in years. Complete, uncomplicated happiness. Later that night, after everyone had gone home and I was cleaning up champagne glasses and party streamers, my phone rang. Unknown number. I almost didn't answer, but something made me pick up.
Mrs. Whitfield? A woman's voice, young, frightened. My name is Rachel Chen. You don't know me, but I saw your interview about elder abuse on the news, and I think my daughter-in-law is trying to do to me what your son tried to do to you. I found documents, plans.
I'm so scared, I don't know what to do." I sat down heavily in my kitchen chair, looking around at this home I'd defended, this life I'd protected. "Rachel," I said gently, "tell me everything, and then I'm going to help you. Because that's what we do, we survivors. We protect each other. We fight back. We refuse to let them win." And as she began telling her story, so similar to mine, so heartbreakingly familiar, I knew this was my purpose now. Not just surviving my own betrayal, but helping others survive theirs. I was Margaret Eleanor Whitfield. I was 75 years old. I'd defeated my own son's attempt to rob me, exposed a conspiracy, changed laws, and helped dozens of other elderly people protect themselves. And I was just getting started. Because at 70, 75, 80, or any age, we deserve dignity. We deserve respect. We deserve to live our lives on our own terms, in our own homes, making our own choices. And anyone who tries to take that away will have to go through people like me first. That night, as I finally crawled into bed in my own house, in my own room, I looked at the ceiling and thought about the text message that had started everything. "Don't react. They're recording you." That warning had saved my life. Not just my assets or my independence, my actual life. Because without those things, I would have withered away in some facility, dying by degrees while my son spent my money. But I didn't wither. I fought. I won. I survived. I thrived. And now I spent my days making sure others could do the same. The last thing I did before turning off my light was send an email to Patricia. "New case. Woman named Rachel Chen. Need your help. Tomorrow?" Her response came immediately. "Always. That's what we do. Sleep well, warrior." I smiled in the darkness. Warrior. At 75, I'd become a warrior. And there was no one I'd rather be. 7 years after that terrible dinner, I stood in a state legislative building testifying in favor of the Elder Protection Act, a comprehensive law that would strengthen oversight of guardianship proceedings, require independent medical evaluations, mandate investigations of suspicious petitions, and create real penalties for those who exploited elderly people. The bill had been nicknamed Margaret's Law by advocates, though I'd tried to discourage that. This wasn't about me. This was about every elderly person who deserved protection. But when the governor signed it into law, with me standing behind him as cameras flashed, I felt a sense of completion. What Damien had tried to do to me had led to systemic change that would protect thousands of people. Damien himself sent a letter that day. "Mom, I saw the news about the bill signing. I'm so incredibly proud of you. You took something terrible and turned it into something meaningful. You protected people who can't protect themselves. That's who you've always been, someone who fights for others, even when it costs you personally. I don't expect you to forgive me, but I want you to know that watching you turn my betrayal into a force for good has been the most powerful lesson of my life. You're exactly the person you raised me to be, and I'm ashamed I failed to live up to that. But I'm trying every day to become someone worthy of calling you Mom again. With love and admiration, Damien." I kept the letter, added it to all the others he'd sent over the years, evidence of slow, painful growth. We had dinner occasionally now, maybe once every 3 months, supervised by my daughters, boundaried, careful. He'd been rebuilding his life, working as a social worker, helping at-risk youth, married to a kind woman named Angela who knew his whole history and loved him anyway. The father of a baby girl he'd named Margaret, after me. When he'd asked permission to use my name, I cried. Not from forgiveness, I still wasn't there yet, might never be there completely, but from recognition that he was trying, genuinely trying to honor what he'd destroyed. "She'll never know what I almost did to you," Damien said when I met baby Margaret for the first time. "I'll make sure of that. But she will know who you are, your strength, your courage, your refusal to be a victim. That's the legacy I want her to inherit." I held my granddaughter, this tiny person named after me, this symbol of hope and possibility, and felt something break open in my chest. Maybe that was what healing looked like. Not forgetting what happened, not pretending the betrayal hadn't occurred, but allowing space for something new to grow in the scorched earth left behind. Or maybe not. Maybe I'd never fully heal from what Damien did. Maybe some wounds were too deep to ever completely close. But I'd learned something more important than healing. I'd learned that you could survive without healing. You could build a beautiful, meaningful life even with scars that never fully faded. At 77, I was still running Whitfield Events, though I'd promoted my longtime assistant to co-owner and worked fewer hours. Still doing advocacy work, though I'd trained younger activists to take over the front line fighting. Still speaking, writing, helping, protecting. Still choosing every single day to be someone other than a victim. And that, I'd discovered, was enough. More than enough. It was everything.